The Arctic is one of Earth's most hostile environments, where survival depends on the smallest of margins. Temperatures can plummet to as low as -50 degrees Fahrenheit, and the landscape is a daunting mix of endless snowfields and unpredictable ice flows. It is here that Alfred found himself drawn time and time again. A seasoned Arctic explorer, Alfred had spent years documenting this icy wilderness and its inhabitants, from the mysterious narwhals that glide beneath the ice to the majestic polar bears that dominate its surface. On this particular expedition, Alfred was exploring a lesser-known route, a stretch of terrain infamous for its sudden storms and hidden crevasses. Despite his experience, he knew the Arctic's dangers were beyond human control. Still, he pressed on, fueled by his love for nature and a desire to bring its untamed beauty to the world. The day began deceptively calm. The sun cast a pale light over the snow, and a faint breeze stirred the icy air. Alfred felt confident as he trudged forward, his heavy boots crunching through the frost. His backpack was laden with supplies, and his camera swung at his side, ready to capture the Arctic's secrets. But as the hours passed, the weather began to change. The wind picked up, carrying with it a biting chill that gnawed through even the thickest layers of clothing. Dark clouds rolled in from the horizon, swallowing the sun and casting the landscape in an ominous grey. Alfred quickened his pace, scanning the terrain for a safe place to take shelter. Suddenly, the ground beneath him shifted. A faint crack echoed through the air, followed by another, louder this time. Alfred froze, his instincts screaming at him to move, but it was too late. The ice beneath his feet gave way, and he plummeted down a small slope, landing hard on the frozen surface below. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and his head struck the ice with a sickening thud. For a moment, Alfred lay still, his body protesting in pain. He tried to move but found his limbs unresponsive. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and the world began to blur. Snowflakes swirled around him, and the biting wind seemed to howl louder, as if mocking his vulnerability. His vision darkened, and the last thing he saw was the unforgiving expanse of ice stretching endlessly around him. As Alfred lay unconscious, snow began to accumulate over his body. The Arctic, indifferent to his plight, continued its relentless assault. Hours passed, and Alfred became just another part of the landscape, a lifeless figure slowly being consumed by the ice. It was during this time that two other explorers happened upon the scene. They were part of a small research team studying the Arctic's changing ice patterns, and their route had intersected with Alfred's by chance. From a distance, they noticed an unusual shape half buried in the snow. Curiosity drove them closer, but as they realized it was a human body, fear overtook them. "What do we do?" one of them asked, his voice trembling. "There's nothing we can do," the other replied, his face pale. "He's gone. If we try to dig him out, we'll risk falling into the ice ourselves." The two men stood there for a moment, the weight of their decision heavy in the air. Then, as if unable to bear the sight any longer, they turned and walked away, leaving Alfred to his frozen grave. Unbeknownst to them, they weren't the only ones who had noticed Alfred. From the ridge of a nearby snowbank, a pair of watchful eyes had been following their movements. The polar bear was enormous, its white fur blending seamlessly with the snow. It had been tracking the area for food but stopped when it saw the men leave. Its sharp instincts told it something was unusual. Cautiously, the bear approached Alfred's motionless body. It sniffed the air, detecting the faint scent of human sweat and the metallic tang of blood. Polar bears are apex predators, and an unconscious man would normally be an easy target. But this bear didn't act on instinct alone. It studied Alfred's still form, its dark eyes reflecting something that looked almost like curiosity or concern. The bear began to circle Alfred, its massive paws crunching the snow. It pawed at the ice, carefully testing its strength, and then leaned closer, its breath forming clouds in the freezing air. After a moment, it started to dig. The process was slow and methodical. The bear's claws, designed to tear through seals' hides and thick ice, now worked delicately to remove the snow covering Alfred's body. It pushed the ice fragments aside with surprising precision, ensuring that it didn't cause further harm to the fragile figure beneath. With each movement, the bear revealed more of Alfred, exposing his frostbitten face and frozen limbs. When the man's body was finally free, the bear stepped back as if to evaluate its work. Then, with a gentleness that defied its size and strength, it nudged Alfred's body with its snout, trying to stir him awake. But Alfred didn't move. The bear seemed to understand that its work wasn't done. It looked around, scanning the horizon, and then made a decision that would change both its life and Alfred's forever. The polar bear began its mission, an act of compassion that defied the instincts of even the most intelligent predators. Alfred's unconscious body lay still, vulnerable and fragile in the unforgiving Arctic. The bear leaned down, nudging him once again with its cold, wet nose. But the man didn't stir. The polar bear let out a deep rumbling sound, almost as if it were sighing, before making a decision. With its powerful jaws and massive strength, it gently gripped Alfred's thick coat and began dragging him across the icy tundra. This was no small feat. The man's weight, combined with the uneven terrain, made the task monumental, yet the bear pressed on, undeterred by the biting wind and the challenges ahead. The Arctic landscape stretched endlessly before them. Ice sheets cracked under the weight of the polar bear's steps, and the howling wind masked the sound of its heavy breathing. Every few minutes, the bear stopped, carefully setting Alfred down and sniffing the air. It was searching for something humans might never understand. After what felt like hours, the bear approached an unfamiliar sight in the barren white expanse. A small research camp nestled among the icy mounds. Its sharp eyes had spotted the faint glow of a generator-powered light and the movement of figures inside. The camp belonged to scientists studying the effects of climate change on the Arctic ecosystem. It was a haven for humans, but for a bear, it was a place of potential danger. The bear slowed its pace as it neared the camp. It placed Alfred's body on the snow and sniffed the air again, detecting the faint scent of humans. The bear seemed to understand that this was the man's best chance at survival. But how would the humans react to its presence? Polar bears were often met with fear and hostility, especially this close to human settlements. Inside the camp, 2 researchers were busy recording temperature readings and analyzing samples. One of them glanced out the small frosted window and froze in place. "There's a bear outside," he whispered urgently, his voice trembling. His colleague rushed to the window, peering out at the enormous creature standing just a few yards away. At first they thought the bear was hunting, perhaps drawn to the scent of food or fuel, but then they noticed the figure lying in the snow. "It's a person," the second researcher said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The bear brought him here." The researchers hesitated, torn between their fear of the bear and their instinct to help the man. The bear, sensing their hesitation, took a step back, creating distance between itself and Alfred. It let out a soft grunt, almost as if urging them to act. Encouraged by the bear's behavior, the researchers opened the camp's door cautiously. They moved toward Alfred, pulling him into the warmth of the shelter. The bear watched every movement intently, ensuring the man was safely in their care. Once the researchers closed the door and began treating Alfred, the bear turned and walked away, its massive frame disappearing into the snowy wilderness. Inside the camp, the researchers worked tirelessly to save Alfred. His body was frostbitten and his pulse was weak, but he was alive. They administered warm fluids and wrapped him in thermal blankets, their actions fueled by the urgency of the situation. When Alfred finally regained consciousness, his first words were faint and disjointed. "The bear, it saved me." The researchers exchanged skeptical glances. It wasn't every day that a polar bear saved a human's life, but the evidence was undeniable. They had seen it with their own eyes. Still, they couldn't fully grasp the depth of what had just occurred. The polar bear's journey back into the Arctic was marked by solitude. It returned to its domain, resuming the rhythms of its wild existence. But for Alfred, the story of his miraculous rescue was only beginning to unfold. Alfred was now on a mission to uncover the truth behind his faint memories of being rescued by the polar bear. The researchers had shared their account of what they witnessed, confirming his fragmented recollections. Despite their reassurances, Alfred found it difficult to believe the enormity of the event. His mind raced with questions. Why had the bear saved him? How could an apex predator show such deliberate compassion? Weeks passed, and Alfred's recovery progressed steadily. As his physical strength returned, so did his determination to find the bear that had changed his life. He began his quest by revisiting the Arctic region, where he had nearly lost his life. Armed with supplies, a camera, and a renewed sense of purpose, Alfred ventured into the frozen wilderness once more. The Arctic was no less treacherous this time. Each step reminded him of the fragility of human life in such an environment, As he retraced the path of his previous expedition, Alfred paid close attention to every detail, searching for any signs of the bear. He knew it was a long shot. Polar bears roam vast territories, but something inside him urged him forward. Alfred's search took weeks. He camped on the ice, documenting his journey in a journal. The nights were long and cold, and the silence of the Arctic was deafening. Yet, in this isolation, Alfred found clarity. He realized he wasn't just searching for the bear, he was searching for meaning in the extraordinary event that had unfolded. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the ice, Alfred spotted movement in the distance. His heart raced as he lifted his binoculars. There, lumbering across the snow, was a polar bear. Alfred couldn't be certain it was the same bear, but something about its gait and demeanor felt familiar. He approached cautiously, respecting the bear's space. The bear paused, turning its massive head toward him. For a moment, man and animal locked eyes. Alfred felt a wave of recognition, an unspoken connection that transcended words. The bear didn't retreat. Instead, it stood its ground, observing Alfred with calm curiosity. Slowly, Alfred removed his gloves and reached into his bag, pulling out a small pouch of fruit he had brought as an offering. He placed the fruit on the snow and stepped back, waiting. The bear moved forward, sniffing the fruit. To Alfred's amazement, it accepted the offering, its powerful jaws gently picking up the pieces. Encouraged, Alfred took a step closer. He raised his hand tentatively, his palm open in a gesture of trust. The bear didn't flinch. It allowed Alfred to touch its thick fur, a moment of profound connection that Alfred would never forget. Tears welled up in Alfred's eyes as he gently patted the bear's shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you for saving my life." The bear responded in its own way, raising its massive paw as if acknowledging Alfred's gratitude. The two shared a moment of quiet understanding before the bear turned and began to walk away, disappearing into the Arctic expanse. Alfred stood there for a long time, watching the bear until it became a distant speck on the horizon. He knew this encounter was a gift, one that few would ever experience or believe. Upon returning home, Alfred dedicated himself to sharing his story with the world. He wrote articles and gave lectures, not just about his miraculous rescue, but about the importance of respecting and protecting wildlife. He became an advocate for Arctic conservation, raising awareness about the challenges faced by polar bears and their shrinking habitat. Alfred couldn't shake the magnetic pull of the Arctic. The memory of his extraordinary encounter with the polar bear wasn't just a story, it was an experience that reshaped his understanding of the world. Despite the photographic evidence and videos he had brought back from his last trip, there were still people who questioned his tale. Some dismissed it as embellished, others doubted such a bond could ever exist. But Alfred knew the truth, and he felt compelled to see his savior and friend once more. Not to prove anything to the doubters, but to deepen the bond, and perhaps, in some way, to repay the bear's kindness. This time, Alfred planned his trip meticulously. He studied the migration patterns of polar bears and the geography of the Arctic with renewed vigor. He knew he couldn't count on mere chance to find the bear again. With him were a small group of close friends, skeptics turned believers who had seen the incredible footage from his last trip. They were curious but cautious, promising to keep a safe distance. Alfred's determination inspired them, though they still struggled to fully grasp the depth of his connection to the bear. The journey to the Arctic was grueling as always. The biting cold and the endless stretches of snow and ice could drain even the most seasoned adventurer. But Alfred felt alive in this environment. Every gust of icy wind, every crack of snow underfoot, brought him closer to the bear he had come to see as a guardian angel. With his friends stationed at a safe vantage point, Alfred began the painstaking task of searching the landscape for any sign of his polar companion. Days turned into weeks, and the group began to grow restless. Alfred, however, was undeterred. Each morning he woke before dawn, scanning the frozen expanse with binoculars. He revisited the spot where he had first encountered the bear, leaving small markers and traces of his presence, hoping the bear would recognize them. Then, one morning, as the first rays of sunlight reflected off the pristine snow, Alfred saw it. A massive white figure moved gracefully across the ice, its outline unmistakable. His heart skipped a beat as he grabbed his camera and began to walk toward it. His friends, watching from a distance, were struck by a mix of awe and fear. They couldn't believe what they were seeing, Alfred approaching a polar bear as if it were an old friend. As Alfred drew closer, the bear stopped and turned its head, as if sensing his presence. There was no hesitation, no sign of aggression. The bear seemed to recognize him, its massive form radiating a calmness that was almost surreal. Alfred slowed his steps, raising a hand in greeting. To his astonishment, the bear responded by lowering its head slightly, an acknowledgement that felt deeply intentional. The two met on the ice, a man and a creature from a world almost untouched by humanity. Alfred extended his hand, and the bear allowed him to touch its fur, a gesture of trust that sent waves of emotion through him. Tears welled up in his eyes as he whispered, "I knew I'd find you again." For hours, Alfred walked alongside the bear, capturing every moment with his camera. The bear led him to breathtaking vistas, crystalline ice formations, glistening under the Arctic sun, stretches of snow that seemed to go on forever, and frozen lakes that reflected the sky like mirrors. It was as if the bear was showing him its world, a silent tour of a realm few humans had ever truly understood. From their distant perch, Alfred's friends were speechless. Watching a polar bear interact so peacefully with a human was like witnessing a miracle. They had come expecting to debunk a myth, but instead, they found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about the natural world. As the day drew to a close, Alfred and the bear returned to the area near the camp. Alfred sat on the ice, exhausted but exhilarated. The bear lay beside him, its presence both comforting and awe-inspiring. Alfred reached out and gently patted the bear's shoulder, the same way he had done during their last encounter. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything." The bear stood up, its massive frame casting a long shadow over the snow. It looked at Alfred one last time before turning and walking away, its silhouette growing smaller until it disappeared into the Arctic vastness. Back at camp, Alfred shared his photographs and videos with his friends, who were now firm believers. The footage was even more extraordinary than before, capturing moments of profound connection and mutual respect. Upon returning home, Alfred's story gained new life. The images and videos silenced even the harshest skeptics, transforming his tale into a symbol of hope and unity between man and nature. Reflecting on his journey, Alfred often said, "That bear taught me more about humanity than any person ever could. It showed me that kindness transcends species, that trust can be built even in the wildest of places." He dedicated the rest of his life to raising awareness about polar bears and their shrinking habitat. His story became a beacon of inspiration, reminding the world of the power of compassion and the importance of protecting the natural world. For Alfred, the bear wasn't just a savior. It was a lifelong friend and a symbol of a bond that could never be broken. Alfred's story inspired countless people, bridging the gap between humanity and nature. The bear, a symbol of compassion and resilience, became a reminder of the extraordinary bonds that can exist between species. Alfred often reflected on that moment in the Arctic, knowing it had changed him forever. The polar bear, meanwhile, continued its life in the wild, unaware of the legacy it had left behind. Yet in its simple act of kindness, it had reminded the world of the power of empathy, even in the most unexpected places.